Hi friends, this is a late night edition of the monthly reading wrap up, so will my thoughts be coherent? We'll find out. This is for June and July, and June was Pride Month, so like everyone else I was like, I'm gonna read so many queer books this month, it's gonna be brilliant. I read 4 books total for June and one of them was queer. I actually started like a bunch of books in June, which I never do. I never read more than one book at once, but I was struggling and so I did, but then I still haven't finished most of those books, so what was that for? But we're gonna get into the ones that I did read, and starting off with my one queer book of the month, Nick and Charlie by Alex Oseman. I was about to call them Alex. This is a novella based on Heartstopper, if you couldn't tell. It's about Nick is going away to uni and Charlie is having some anxiety about what that means for their relationship, and he's not communicating that, which is a trope we all love. There's not much to say about this. It was cute. I didn't like it as much as the Heartstopper graphic novels. So yeah, there's not much there. It's just a cute story and I still enjoyed it because it's Heartstopper. I was on the young adult train, so the next thing I read was an e-arc of The Undead Truth of Us by Brittany S. Lewis. I read this on Kindle. This is my first time ever reading a book on Kindle. Shall we say never again? Shall we say? I can't do it. I hate reading on Kindle so much. But this is a young adult book, up and coming. It's coming out then. I don't remember. Yes, a young adult book, kind of a romance, but also has some horror aspects. It's about a protagonist whose mother dies very suddenly, seemingly. The personification of her grief is she starts seeing zombies. People around her start turning into these kind of half zombie, half human creatures. And she has to deal with that, and also deal with getting over her mother, and also deal with a new cute boy on the block, and that her dad left. There's a lot going on in this book. I thought it was good. It wasn't the best YA I've ever read, but I could see it being a popular YA book, and I could see it working for me better when I was a young adult. I liked the horror aspect. I'm really not into zombies, so I don't know why I thought that would work. I'm someone who went through grief at a young age, and I connected to it. I thought it was well written in that way. I also thought the romance was paced very well. I still think it was a cute romance story at the end of the day, and that's kind of what I came to do, so I'll give it a good 3 stars. Then I decided to try and be an intellectual again, and I read The Broken Wings by Khaled Gibran. This is a classics. It's described as like a poetic novel. I keep seeing it listed as poetry, but it's not like poetry. It's like, it's a novel, but it's philosophical. Anyway, it's a philosophical novel. It is a romance, a tragic romance, about, it's kind of semi-autobiographical about Gibran and this woman Selma that he was in love with, but because of the oppressive misogynistic society that they lived in, they couldn't be together, and Selma kind of gets pushed off with some other man. Deeply sad, very beautiful, but also it's that thing that old books sometimes do where they're like, I'm critiquing a societal oppressive structure, but I also kind of agree. Like, it was claiming to be anti-misogynistic and anti what Selma was going through, but then it would just say the most horrifically misogynistic thing ever. This is written in 1912, so like, of course, but yeah, it's a little, that juxtaposition is a little confusing. It only got a 3.5 stars because of that, where it's just like, you're pissing me off so much and I'm struggling to see your point of view, but I appreciate your intentions. Again, it kind of gave me the vibe where I was like, I know you're smarter than me, but it feels like you're trying to sound smart when maybe the sentence didn't need to sound like that. Do you know what I'm trying to say? Yeah. If you like classics, poetic, beautiful writing, tragic love story, give this a shot, as long as you're able to like, know there's going to be misogyny there, and maybe if that won't ruin it for you, then give it a go. Then I returned to the infamous Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This, of course, I DNF'd in January. Got about halfway, honestly, or maybe a little bit less than halfway. But I got a decent bit into it. Thought it was so boring, that's why I DNF'd it the first time. And then everyone was like, Maeve, listen to the audiobook. It's like a full cast audiobook, really impressive. And it was, but I still fucking detested it. Maybe detest is too strong, but this is so boring to me. I literally don't care. It's one of those stories that is just about people's lives, their career lives and their personal lives, and if you don't care, then literally you're gonna get nothing from it, and I got nothing from it. I love things about musicians. I love music. I love the behind the scenes of the music industry. So of course I thought this was gonna work for me. And then I was just like, why is this book so popular? Like, I still kind of don't understand it. I will be probably getting rid of this book, which actually this was a Christmas present. Maybe I shouldn't. Whatever. I still prefer Seven Husbands and Malibu Rising by like a million miles, but it has kind of put me off reading her other books because I'm like, I don't trust what the people say. That took up most of June and then I got COVID for the first time, which is really embarrassing. And I thought I was gonna read a bunch, as we all do when we get COVID. We're like, oh, we'll just sit in the house and read for a week. No, my brain didn't work, as I very quickly learned. But I forced myself to read 7 Days in June by Tia Williams. Only because it's in June. Didn't end up being that important, but I did it anyway. This is a literary romance novel. It's about Eve Mercy, who had a week as a teenager with this boy. They got into a very intense relationship for a week, a very dark one, bonded over not very nice shit. And then 15 years later, they meet up again and have another week of bonding. Very well written. The characterization is great. I loved both of the characters. I just didn't really care about the romance, which is a shame because that is a lot of the plot of the book. I've been having a lot recently where I'm like, this book is great. I don't know why I don't feel anything towards it. I like still am kind of struggling with that. Don't know what's going on up here, but I still think it was a good story, a good romance. Again, just well written. I like the dark aspects. Just be prepared. Read the trigger warnings for sure. Then I finally finished the beast that I've been tackling for a long time. That is The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I could make a whole video just about Erin Morgenstern and the Morgenstern verse, if you will. It's about Zachary, who finds a book in his university library and he starts reading it. It's very magical, has a lot of different stories all in one, and he realizes that one of the stories is about him. It's about an experience, a very specific experience he had as a child. And he's like, what the fuck? This is why am I in the book? So he tries to research it. It's very anonymous. You can't find anything out about the book or the author. And then it's kind of a portal fantasy, the portal of which takes you to the Starless Sea, or specifically the harbour of the Starless Sea, which is a place that I could honestly cry thinking about because I am so sad that it's not real. This book is, on paper, my perfect book. And I think my only mistake in reading it was that I stopped it about halfway through and took a break for a few weeks and then came back to it. And this book is very, very convoluted and very layered. There's a lot of stories within stories within stories. And because I took a break from it, by the time I got to about here, this whole bit, severely confused. Had a great time, but kind of no idea what was going on anymore. Erin Morgenstern knows exactly the concepts that I would want to be written into a fantasy book, and she writes them beautifully, eloquently, enchantingly. The Night Circus, her other novel, is one of my favourite books of all time. The concept is everything I would love in like a magical novel, and it is executed again perfectly. I didn't get that feeling while I was reading it that I was like, this is incredible, I'm in love with it, which I feel like I should have. It's an ode to storytelling. It's a love story for books and stories, and like if you love nothing more than the idea of a cozy fireplace and tons of bookshelves, a huge library, wooden bookcases, and you know, sitting with a blanket next to the fire with the book, that is what this book is and feels like. And that was perfect, and I almost cried again. I literally almost cried / did tear up because this isn't real and I cannot go there, and it's just the perfect cozy warm, oh, I actually am getting sad thinking about it. Even the stories within the stories of this book I loved. They were enchanting and magical, and every one of those words I can't think of right now. This was just a lot. It was a lot. And then on a huge juxtaposition, this is gonna happen a lot, I'm a mood reader, I picked up The Selection by Kira Cass. I originally bought this for a YouTube video, which was going to be reading popular BookTok books. I bought Shatter Me, We Were Liars, Good Girl's Guide to Murder, this, and like The Haying Game, I think. I read We Were Liars for it. hate that book. So fucking boring. I cannot believe it's that popular. And I also read Shatter Me, which, here's the notes I took during Shatter Me that pretty much sums it up. I didn't actually hate this book, but yeah. And then I read this, and I think I'm gonna ditch that video now. I just don't, I'm kind of over it, even though I filmed a lot of footage I actually like for it. But I think I'm over it. So I'll just tell you exactly what I thought about this book now. This is garbage, but like reality TV garbage, in the way that like you like to consume it even though you know it's rotting your brain. Like, this was beyond surface level. Like, it's kind of a dystopian about a society where there's a bunch of caste systems, much like the Hunger Games. Whenever the prince is old enough, they get all the girls in the nation to try and become his bride, basically. There's the selection, which is choosing a bride, a princess I should say. And our protag, America Singer, she enters the selection, and even though she has a boy back home that she was seeing, but he's like poor, so they can't kind of be together, but she's like, I don't care if you're poor, but he's really insecure. There's like so much toxic masculinity in this book. He's like, I need to provide for you. She like makes him a meal, and he fucking storms off because he's like, this is fucking embarrassing for me, I need to provide. It was so much. This book is weirdly misogynistic, but it's basically about her journey with the prince. It's a bit of a love triangle. It's not even a bit of, it's a huge love triangle. Didn't care for either man. Definitely not the prince. This book is also kind of weirdly pro-monarchy, but I'm like, this is the monarchy that's oppressing you. Like, you know that, right? This is his fault. And they had rebels, and I was like, okay, good. You know, this is obviously going to get a bit political. Well, I got interrupted in the middle of an intensely passionate rant about the politics in the selection. So that was really humbling. Okay, so I like never even finished what I was trying to say after I got cut off. But basically, they had rebels, and I was like, oh, sick, these are like the good guys because, like, you know, fuck the like oppressive monarchy system. No. The rebels were like painted to be like horrific, vicious, like animalistic people, and I was like, what? Like, this is like the anti-Hunger Games. Like, it's very confusing, and like I assume that other books go more into the politics, hopefully in like a more kind of like nuanced way. I mean, I doubt it. I just said the word nuanced about the selection, but that's the only reason that I may ever read the other sequels. But I thought it was a trilogy. No, there's like 6 fucking books, and then like a bunch of novellas. Like, literally go fuck yourself. And next up was Lapvona by Tessa Mushrig. I was very kindly gifted an ARC of this. This is my first ever physical ARC from Penguin Random House. This is a literary kind of horror thematically novel. That sentence didn't make sense, but you know what I meant. This is about the medieval town of Lapvona. We follow Jude and Marek. They live in completely impoverished conditions while, you know, the monarchy is rich and powerful, as monarchies tend to be. Then the town faces a period of drought and severe starvation, and it's kind of about the depravity that humans will go to. It's basically a novel that kind of exists to be shocking, or at least that's the kind of vibe that I got. It exists to be disgusting and depraved, and to make you go, oh my god, I shouldn't be reading this in public. There isn't much of an arc to this structurally. It's very much like a straight line kind of, which left me kind of finishing the book going, okay, the story's just over now. There wasn't really a conclusion, but generally not the worst thing I've ever read. I just wouldn't ever reread it, I don't think. And I won't think about it very much, to be honest. Then I started a series on TikTok where I pull from a TBR mug, which is, you know, like randomly selected from the books I own. And the first one I got was A Far Wilder Magic by Alison Saft. I was under the impression that this was a fantasy romance. It kind of is. It's like magical realism kind of romance. But definitely not as fantasy as I thought. This is about a girl who lives on her own now in a gothic, creaky manor. Her mother is an alchemist, and she has kind of fucked off to leave her on her own. And then a boy comes knocking on the doors who is also an alchemist, and he says, I need your mother to let me have an apprenticeship. And she's going, my mother's not even here, but you can help me out. So they decide to participate in the hunt together, even though both of their religions kind of shun upon it. The hunt is a kind of cultural thing where they have these spirits, and when one comes in your town, it's your duty to kill it. And this is the last remaining one, the Hala. It's so cute. You know, it becomes a kind of, not really enemies to lovers, but like a I don't really like you as a person to lovers, you know? I wish there was more of the kind of quest hunt. That's kind of what I was in for. I love a quest book so much. But the hunt was literally like 2 chapters in the end of the book. But the vibes were nice. It just, again, it was like, oh, I know this is good, but I don't really feel that much towards it. I probably won't think about it ever again. And I kind of haven't thought about it, to be honest. But if you like kind of alchemist vibes and a little cute romance, I think give it a shot. The cover is still gorgeous though, to be fair. I also just want to say I felt bad for the fox the whole time. Next up, I read The Marriage of Heaven and Hell by William Blake. This is a very, very short poetry philosophy collection on these beautiful plates with these illustrations. I did end up reading with the transcripts at the back though, because it's impossible to read on the paintings. This is kind of about the religious idea of good and evil and Blake's kind of critique of that. He argues that evil has a very good place in the world and is a necessary place in the world, and the balance is a very necessary part of humanity. A lot of religious imagery, obviously, a lot of metaphors that I maybe didn't get all of them, a lot of animal-based metaphors. It was really well written. This is my favourite one, if you're interested. There was a few that really stuck out to me, but that one was my favourite. But I really do enjoy religious theory and kind of analysing religious ideals and how they affect the world and maybe why they shouldn't affect the world the way that they do. Then again, huge juxtaposition. I read The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. This was again pulled from the TBR jar. I would not have picked this because I DNF'd it last year. I was like, this is so young adult, and I wasn't really used to young adult yet. I thought it was really cringy, not very well written. Do I still feel that way? Yes. Did I hate it as much the first time? Definitely not. Again, I read this in like a day and a half, which is very fast for me, because it is, again, it's like that garbage that doesn't take any effort to consume. You can just consume it. It's about a girl who finds out that she is inheriting billions from a billionaire that she's never met. She has no idea why. It's a bit of a mystery. The family's not happy about it. There's some, as you can see from the title, some like games, like riddle type shit. I love escape rooms and stuff more than anything in the world. That was kind of my main pull for this. And also because people said that if you like Knives Out, read this. They have like a vaguely similar concept. Beyond that, literally nothing in common. Like, do not listen to that advice. I definitely probably won't read the other ones because I didn't really care for the characters. They did have cringy dialogue. I liked the moments where it kind of talked about what it would be like to be a 16-year-old and get given $1 billion and like the power to help people. I liked that aspect, but beyond that it seemed very unrealistic, and again, just there's like no depth. The author, it feels like they just didn't try because they were like, oh, this is a young adult book, so it's fine. I expect better from you. Next up, I read On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. This is a very beautiful story about being a first-generation immigrant, the Vietnam War and the generational impacts of that, being queer in America, being considered an other in America. It was truly harrowing at times, very heartbreaking, very beautiful, very lyrical, sometimes a little too so. I had that kind of vibe with a couple times where I was like, this kind of reads like Tumblr poetry, like this could have just been a normal sentence, didn't need to have the like symbolism metaphor because it kind of makes you cringe. But for the most part, this was very masterfully crafted. As you can see, I tabbed all of the bits that I really was like sitting and staring at the wall for 5 minutes after reading. I loved the individual stories and I loved how they impacted the arc as a whole. A lot of great running themes subliminally along the bottom, if that's how you would say that sentence. Read the trigger warnings, but I definitely do recommend this. I think it was probably as good as I thought it was going to be. So, a success. And then kindly gifted to me by my friend Chad, I read Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldry. This, as you can see, is a very cozy, low-stakes fantasy about an orc who's tired of the murder and she decides to find the town and start a coffee shop. And that's it. It's literally about them starting a coffee shop, finding a family, completely found family. There is some trouble along the way, but this book feels like a coffee shop. It feels like it smells like coffee and cinnamon and baked goods and hugging people you love, and it was so warm and lovely. And again, I consumed this in like a day and a half. I thought it was great. I love low stakes fantasy. I love found family. It has, you know, all of the bits you love about a Studio Ghibli film, where it just feels safe. You don't have to worry about the stakes. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. I wish this was a series. I would gladly read the other ones, but the author said they might write more books in the universe, which excites me, but I'm gonna miss them. It's also sapphic, so that's a plus. Then I read an arc which was kindly gifted to me by Fernwood Publishing for This House Is Not a Home by Katlia. And this is a fictional but very much based on true stories about the treatment of Indigenous people in Canada. This is about the residential schools and the dispossession and the exploitation and the stripping of culture and the right to exist on your own land. It's a very short story that spans multiple generations, but it's primarily about Cole, who gets kidnapped from his family home as a child and forced into a residential school where his name, his language and his entire identity and way of living is stripped from him, forced into completely Christian ideals. So when he returns home, he has to try and refine these things, only to have his physical home ripped from him and forced into a modern home to be reliant on income, to be reliant on a basically capitalist society all of a sudden. And it is heartbreaking and really harrowing and not the most nuanced or in-depth discussion into these things because it is very short, but this is such a perfect introductory into these things if you're wanting to learn about them. Hi, it's me editing. I just wanted to pop in and say, like, it's been a couple months since I read this book and I still think about it all the time. Like, just the portrait it paints of the horrific exploitation of Indigenous people and the generational kind of familial trauma, like children having to grow up feeling such guilt for being able to function in society that was forced upon their family, and the struggle and guilt of not being able to connect to your ancestors and your land and your roots, but also like the absolute beauty in the way that these Indigenous cultures do connect to land and relate to land and animals and everything, and the harmony they feel, and like it's just beautifully fucking done. And I just think I gave it a little bit of shit for being less detailed, but like it clearly didn't need to be because I think about it all the time. I absolutely recommend reading this book and other books by Indigenous authors about Indigenous stories. It is so important that we learn and keep these stories alive because they are actively being erased as we speak. Then another one from the TBR jar, I read Cinderella is Dead by Kaylin Bayron. I read a lot of borderline negative stuff about this book right before I read it, like people saying it was very mediocre or they straight up didn't like it, so I was scared. And then I loved it. So what were you all talking about? This is about a world where Cinderella existed in this kingdom before she is dead, as the title insists, but her story is kind of used as an excuse for the completely oppressive patriarchal society that they're living in. Women do not have rights in this kingdom, and our protagonist, as young adult likes to do, is sick of it and she wants to change it, and I enjoyed the ride. This has the vibes of a fairy tale story. There's a big huge magical castle, but there's also so much in the woods and there's dark magic, and I just love that vibe. I love it. I liked the romance. It was a little, of course it's a little insta love, but like literally who cares? I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the characters. I liked the story. The villain was like so one-dimensional, but like again, I'll let it pass. Overall, I think if you like those vibes that I described, like the woodlandy dark retelling, because it is very dark for a young adult book, the way that they kind of rewrite the Cinderella story is very gritty. And if you like that, I do recommend giving it a try. Even though it doesn't work for everyone, it worked for me. And finally, I read The Little Prince by this author whose name I won't be attempting. This is a children's classic. I don't really know how to tell you the plot of this. It's basically a story for children, but very much for adults. It's about being a child and trying to hold on to childhood innocence and understanding of things, and the kind of the lens you have on things as a child that is a lot more creative and free. The responsibility and the mortality of being an adult, and Yes, I cried, like everyone did, but it was really beautiful and it's very well written. I think I would have to read it a couple more times to really get everything. Any children's literature that can give an adult something to grapple with is very greatly appreciated by me. And the very top review on Goodreads also made me cry after I stopped reading it. So if you have Goodreads, I recommend reading that after you read this book. This was a decent 2 months for me. I'm kind of stuck in that rut where like, I'm enjoying the books I'm reading and I know that they're objectively good, but I'm not really feeling that like 5-star pull towards them. I have decided I'm just doing these in 2-month slots because it makes me feel less pressure to read more in a month. So I hope that works for you, and I hope you enjoyed and got some book recs and are having a great day and all of those things. Goodbye.